Alright folks, this is a fun topic that I have been sitting on for a while now. And actually, it's because it's been on my mind for the past year or so. Based on my YouTube Studio analytics, almost 85% of my entire viewership is made up of people between the ages of 18 and 44 years old, with the largest portion of that being between 25 and 34. Shout out to the 13 to 17 year olds here. You're the reason I don't cuss. Alright, so to give you guys a little bit of a background dynamic of my life, without getting into too much detail, I'm obviously a massive gamer. Like many of you probably, the older I've gotten, the less time I've had to actually play video games. And now, even if I'm not playing video games, I'm very much intertwined with the world of gaming, so much so that this channel is like my main hobby, outside of playing soccer and a few other things. That being said, my wife is pretty much the polar opposite. I could show her an Xbox controller and she might think it's a PlayStation controller. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I don't even think she knows that the Switch 2 is a different console than the Switch. Like, it's just not her world. Now, that being said, she's very supportive of my hobby and she'll click on every single video and let it run in the background on her phone just so I can get more watch hours, even though I told her that that doesn't really help my channel grow, especially at this point. But hey, she's my biggest fan. And I'm not just saying that because she's going to be listening to this later, because she doesn't listen to the videos, she lets them run on mute. Anyway, that's besides the point. So I myself have found that I have a probably unhealthy obsession with gaming. I think it was good for me in different moments in my life. Like, for example, there are a lot of dumb things that you can do when you're younger that can really ruin your life going forward. Spending a Friday night playing Mario Kart is probably not one of them. There are also a lot of problem-solving skills that you can learn by gaming. And I think there's something to be said about the types of reflexes that people can gain by gaming. And also there's the sense of immersion, the sense of wonder. But I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm assuming I don't need to explain to you guys all the positives of gaming. And based off of the maturity levels of most of the viewers on this channel, and no, I'm not saying that sarcastically, I genuinely mean it, have you seen the types of people that usually comment on YouTube videos? I would imagine that most of you also understand all of the negative impacts that potentially could come from somebody that games too much. Now look, this is obviously very subjective and it's all contingent on what you hold valuable in your life. Like, for example, I would never put gaming above anything that's important for me and my family. Like, I would never be a neglectful husband or father because I really wanted to play a video game. But I also realize that for a lot of people, gaming is their outlet, so they might need to kind of be like, listen, I need my 1 or 2 hours a day in order for me to be a better husband and father and human being altogether. So it's not really something that's set in stone from a person to person. But that being said, I've always considered that I probably had too much of an obsession with gaming, and it's something that I think about a lot as a father. Because let's be real, if my kids are going to be introduced into video games, it's going to be from me. It's not going to come from my wife. And since my wife is not a gamer, she obviously doesn't understand many of the benefits that come from gaming. And she's not militant against it or anything, but realistically speaking, if I'm not bringing video games into the house, she's probably going to try to be against it because in her mind, it would be an excessive distraction. So we've actually had a lot of talks about gaming and when we think it would be an ideal time to actually introduce our kids into video games. And the conversation actually bounces around quite a bit. Mind you, my oldest is not even in kindergarten yet, so they're still really young. And I remember I used to romanticize the idea of me and my child playing a co-op game together. I still vividly remember grabbing Donkey Kong Country, the first game I ever held in my hand, and putting it into the Super Nintendo, and just thinking about how mesmerized I was by that entire experience. And it's an experience that I don't really want to withhold from my children. But at the same time, I also kind of have this philosophy of like, if your kid's happy and enjoying themselves, is there really a need to introduce something new? Like from a hobby and fun perspective. Like one of the best pieces of advice that I actually got from somebody prior to having kids was that you shouldn't take your kids to Disneyland while they're still enjoying the playground. And I've kind of lived by that philosophy. As long as my kids spend all day playing and they're enjoying themselves and they're always smiling, I mean, why would I try to be like, hey, instead of doing that, come do this instead? Right, and that's not even considering the impacts of screen time and the recommendations for how long a kid should be idle versus moving around. Like, there are much deeper studies and psychological discussions on this stuff anyway, but that's not even going into that route. I'm just like, they're having fun outside on their balance bikes and scooters. Is it really a smart idea for me to sit there and be like, hey, instead of being outside, come in here, grab this controller, this is what you're doing for fun now. Now, mind you, I don't really play video games when my kids are awake. So outside of like when they were really young, before they knew how to speak even, I don't think they've ever seen me actually play a video game. But you know, like my oldest will come around and ask, be like, oh, is that Mario? Is that the Switch? You got a new controller, what's that for? He's hinting something. I mean, my older sisters live nearby. One of them has a son that has a PS5 and the other one has kids that own a Switch. So it's not like my son has never seen video games before. He understands the concept, but he still obviously does not play video games. Now, the concern that I have is an entirely selfish concern, obviously, is that when or if my children ever get into video games, ideally, I'd want them to like the games that I liked. Like, I'm not going to deny them the chance of playing video games with their friends and doing what's popular with their community, because I realize there's a big social aspect of that. If game nights can involve me and my kids instead of having to bring people over to my house all the time, that'd be great too. If my brother and cousins decide to watch this video, they're probably realizing that they're eventually going to get voted off the island. Anyway, so recently we got the kids like these little toy cameras where they can take pictures with them, obviously. It's like a legitimate thing, it has an SD card in there, you can transfer the photos to your PC, all that fun stuff. But apparently these cameras also have little games in them. Nothing deep, obviously, it's like a simple mobile touchscreens game. There's also like a little tiny D-pad on the side of it too, I guess. And honestly, we didn't even know there were any games on there until one day I actually saw that my son was like frustrated while playing with the camera. It actually turned out that he found Snake, like that old Nokia game. And so he was like wondering why he kept bumping into the wall and the snake kept dying. So naturally, all of a sudden, we have this little boy who is become obsessed with some type of game. And being the ever worrying millennial parents that we are, we're like, oh, it's time to have a discussion about this. And it's like, on one hand, it's like, it's just Snake on his toy camera. Does it really matter that much? But then there's also the concern of like, if he's not playing for more than 15 or 20 minutes, then he might throw a tantrum about it. Is that really healthy at that point? I actually don't know the answer to that because I am not a child psychologist. I'm simply somebody that's just running around blind and hoping that they don't screw up their child. See, my logic is when it comes to video games is that at some point I know they're going to be asking for whatever popular console all of their friends are playing at school. Like, I realize at some point between the ages of 7 and 8, maybe 6, potentially even sooner than that, to be honest, my kids are eventually going to come to me and be like, how come I can't play video games when everybody else is playing video games? Then, instead of being like, well, if everybody else jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? I'd rather have a better answer ready for my kids than my parents had for me. And also, I figure when it gets to that point where they mention it a few extra times and they're being very pushy about it, then, I could bust out the Nintendo 64 or the Wii, or even my Switch, to be honest. And I could throw on a party game and play with them. Yeah, I'm kind of limited to Nintendo consoles here. I don't really own anything else, to be honest. I guess I could technically attach it to my PC, but I don't want my kids touching my PC. But I don't know, I kind of also dread the idea of my kids being introduced to video games because then they're just gonna keep asking for it. Like, as soon as they realize that Nintendaddy's cabinet that's in his office is full of video game consoles, I just know they're just gonna ask every single day, like, are we gonna play Mario? Are we gonna play Mario? Are we gonna play Mario? And I don't really want that either. Obviously, at that point, it's all about teaching them self-control and patience, and I'm gonna be like, no, only on Friday nights, which... Okay, here's a little bit of a tangent. I remember when the Wii came out, I was so, like, over the top excited for it. I was in high school, mind you. It's not like I was a child being like, oh, I can't wait for the Wii. It was like, no, I was like, a teenager that had spent the past few years playing Halo. I skipped the GameCube. That was like the one Nintendo generation that I didn't buy into. Well, outside of the Switch too, for now. But like, I was not gonna skip the Wii. There was no chance in hell. I was so excited for that thing. And mind you, like, I never completely left Nintendo either. Like, while I was playing Halo, we still played Super Smash Bros. All the time. Mostly Smash Bros. 64, but still. And I had a Game Boy Advance and a Nintendo DS. So it's not like I jumped ship. I just didn't have a GameCube. So I remember leading up to the launch of the Wii, I was just so excited for it. And nobody else around me in school was excited for it. Because everybody's like too cool for the Nintendo console, right? But I had one friend who was equally as nerdy and full of confidence as I was, who was not embarrassed to admit that he loved a Nintendo console. And I remember the Wii launched in November, so I actually got mine at midnight. I was first in line for it. And then after that, I ended up camping out at a nearby Best Buy because my friend wanted one, so I still got the whole overnight experience, even though I bought mine at midnight. I ended up playing it for like the next 24 hours straight, loved it. My brothers and I loved it. I started taking the Wii to everybody's house. If my friends had a gathering, I'd be like, yo, can I bring my Wii? And then like more and more people would play it. I saw like the blue ocean thing happen in front of my eyes. Like, I'd go take it to the local community center where they always had a TV set up and people can play video games. And then all of a sudden everybody's just like lining up to try out Wii Sports. People that didn't know English, people that didn't know how to move half the time, old people, young people, everybody. And they're all just sitting there shaking this controller around playing tennis. It was legitimately incredible. And like within a week or two after launch, I saw that nerdy friend in school and I was like ready to talk to him about the Wii. I knew he was like a massive Zelda fan, way bigger than I was, so I wanted to ask him what he thought of Twilight Princess because I hadn't started playing it yet. And so I asked him about it a couple weeks after it came out, and he was telling me that he was so excited for the Christmas holiday coming up so he can finally play it. I was kind of like, what? Like, why would you have to wait for the Christmas holiday? And he was like, well, we don't really play video games during the school year, but we get to play unlimited amount of time during the holidays. And I thought that was odd, to say the least. Like, my mind couldn't grasp this logic. I'm like, what do you mean you can only play during the holidays? Now, apparently his parents weren't actually that strict. It was because, like, you know, this thing came out in November, so like the finals were coming up and exams, so they had made a deal where they wouldn't play until the holidays started. But during the regular year, he would obviously still get to play video games on weekends for a few hours. But still, like, I was somebody that I'd get home from school and I would play video games. You know, I'd go play soccer or basketball, and then when I'd get home, I'd play video games. At night before bed, for a couple hours, I would jump on Xbox Live and I would play video games. That's just what we did. So the idea that it was even limited to any extent was bizarre for me. And I was always like, why would his parents do that to him? As if like they were punishing him. Like, this is how I viewed it. I'm like, this guy's living under like a militant regime at this point. But then, like, you know, as it goes, you start getting older and you start seeing the wisdom behind some of the decisions that his parents made. And mind you, his parents are phenomenal people that are very active in their children's lives too. I made a bad judgment on them when I was a teenager because I was like, why would they not let their kid play Wii? And like, credit to them, I think they got what they wanted out of it too. Because my friend and his brother were both like Ivy League graduates, graduating near or at the top of their class. I think this guy was actually valedictorian, and they both went to like a very top ranked school in our area. Now, I'm not the kind of person that necessarily measures the worth or the success of somebody based off of the school they went to, nor do I measure it based off of how much somebody's making or what they studied or what they're doing with their life. Like, yeah, I'm an engineer, but that's because, well, my dad was an engineer and both my parents were immigrants, and when they showed up, they were kind of like, all right, you got 3 choices, doctor, lawyer, engineer. And I was like, which one takes the least amount of school? And they're like, engineering. I'm like, all right, got it. But, you know, obviously growing up in America and realizing there are multiple ways for somebody to be financially comfortable, and I think going to school and studying something that could potentially lead to a lucrative lifestyle is a good way to not necessarily guarantee that you'll be financially stable, but it will make it more likely. And ideally, I would like my kids to be financially stable. Like, they don't gotta be super duper wealthy or anything like that, but I'd like them to be comfortable. And I don't want them to turn around and look at me later on and be like, well, why didn't you let me focus more on school or trades or whatever it is so I can make money? So on one hand, I'm like, yo, I want my kids to enjoy themselves. I want them to play video games. I want them to have a lot of fun. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, I guess if we find a way to balance it with moderation, if I limit the amount of gaming they had, something that actually was not done to me, perhaps they can grow and be better than I am. Because that's the goal, right? Like, when you're gonna have another child, you're like, how do I make their life better than mine? And obviously, it's all subjective about what's considered better and what isn't. Like, there's no boxes that you have to check off. But based off of an individual experiences and how their life is shaped, I'm guessing most people have an idea of how they gauge what's good and how they can deliver to their children what's better. And likewise, I have my philosophy, my wife has her philosophy, our philosophies overlap in many, or rather most areas. And so we're delivering that to the best that we can to our kids. Hopefully. They're still young. I'm sure they'll tell us later on whether we did a good job or a bad job. But yeah, so like the gaming topic comes up quite a bit in the back of my mind. And I'm wondering if this is just a me thing. Do I over obsess about this? Like, I realize it's easy enough for me just to be like, everything in moderation. But you know, it's not always that simple. Like, there's nothing more that I would enjoy this weekend than to bust out the Nintendo 64, for example, and play Mario Party with my kids. But I realize that despite the fact that they would be enjoying that, I would realistically be doing that more for me than I am for them. And I'd much rather fill up the kiddie pool with water and have them go outside and we can just do like a little fight with our water guns. And I don't know, I'm like always going back and forth on this. And that's kind of why I wanted to make this video, just because like, I'm like, let me get my thoughts out there and see if anybody else can relate to this. Am I over obsessive? Okay, I know I'm over obsessive. I have like 10 videos about Switch 2 sales in the past 2 months, and Nintendo has only ever released their numbers twice. But seeing as how the age ranges here are between the ages of 18 and 44, I'm wondering what kind of experiences some of you guys could share. Because I know a lot of you have children as well. And I think a couple weeks ago I mentioned in one of my videos that my sister doesn't connect her kids' Switch to the internet. And the comment section was kind of funny because I found half the people were like, yo, your sister's very smart to keep her kids off the internet. And the other half of the comments were saying that my sister is being idiotic and she's being a terrible parent because she's not letting her kids have fun. So I'm kind of expecting a similar type of back and forth based off of this video. Either way, I mean, this is just something that's been on my mind. It's not really a Switch 2 related video, so I can't imagine this is going to get more than like a couple thousand views anyway. But obviously I'm not doing this for the views. I'm doing this just to kind of get it off my chest and also to kind of speak to people and see what you guys think. And look, this is not meant to be taken super seriously either. Like, I'm just having fun right now, and I imagine that a lot of you would have fun listening to this too. But yeah, I'm gonna close this off before I continue to ramble. Let me know what your thoughts are. I would be very intrigued to hear different people's opinions on this. Both on like how you would or have handled things with your kids when it comes to gaming, and I guess in general, if you'd like to leave feedback on this type of video, let me know. Either way, thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you guys on the next one.